Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I must thank you for your continuous support. It is greatly appreciated. Well, here we are again, January 2026. And the American experiment, that grand, audacious thing our Enlightenment ancestors once dared to imagine, has been successfully reduced to a reality television production directed by a man who still, after all these years, appears to believe that the Oval Office is a real estate listing. Let me begin with an observation, if I may, of almost bewildering banality. Donald Trump kept his promises. This is, of course, precisely the problem. You see, the rest of us, the civilized portion of the human species, the ones who still read books and haven't had our attention spans atomized into 16-second increments, we rather assumed that campaign rhetoric was a species of theatrical performance, a kind of grand pantomime. We thought naively that once one achieved actual power, once one sat down in the Situation Room and actually understood the magnitude of what one had promised to do, reason might intervene, sobriety might emerge, the prefrontal cortex might suddenly activate after years of apparent dormancy. But no. The man proved us wrong. And I say this with the utmost respect for intellectual humility. We were idiots to expect otherwise. The Department of Government Efficiency. Doge. Let me pause here to contemplate the sheer philological obscenity of this naming convention. We have reduced the entire American administrative apparatus, centuries of institutional knowledge, regulatory frameworks, diplomatic protocols, to an internet meme. And not even a clever one, not even a Mencken-esque epigram or a Swiftian paradox. We've named our assault on the civil service after a dog cryptocurrency and the Twitter banter of the world's richest man. This is what passes for wit in the age of Trump. Nearly 320,000 federal employees gone, terminated, resigned, bought off, take your pick. The Department of Education effectively dissolved, as if the solution to America's educational malaise was simply to have less education policy, as if ignorance were a species of efficiency. The man promised to dismantle the deep state, and he did precisely that, except, of course, he didn't touch the military-industrial complex, the national security apparatus, or any of the actual organs of power that manufacture American hegemony. No, no. He went after the people who count endangered species and ensure that your pharmaceutical companies don't poison you quite so efficiently. This is the genius of Trumpism. It wears the costume of radicalism while performing the most thoroughly reactionary acts imaginable. Schedule F. Let me explain this to those who haven't been paying attention. Schedule F allows the President to reclassify civil servants as political appointees, transforming permanent government into a patronage machine. This is Tammany Hall with nuclear codes. This is the logical conclusion of every tin pot dictator's handbook. Get rid of the professionals, replace them with loyalists, and consolidate power. And the bureaucrats, and here's where I confess my astonishment, they complied. There was no crisis of conscience, no grand principled stand. The administrative state rolled over like a house pet. One thinks of the civil service as some sort of immune system protecting the republic against despotism, and it turns out to be more like a particularly docile golden retriever. This brings me to the matter of mass deportations, the deployment of the National Guard to American cities, to sanctuary cities as they're called, as if the Constitution had suddenly been repealed and we'd reverted to some sort of authoritarian state, is perhaps the most revealing moment of the entire year. The man promised the largest deportation operation in American history, and he delivered. Families separated, children torn from their parents. And for what? For the political theatre of it, for the optics, for the base, which apparently views human suffering as a form of entertainment. One might have thought, in the year 2025, that we'd moved beyond the point where a sitting president could brandish ethnic cleansing as electoral strategy. One would be wrong. Trump didn't just talk about mass deportations, he enacted them. And the Republicans, the supposed party of limited government, of constitutional restraint, applauded. They applauded the militarization of domestic policing. They applauded the suspension of due process. They applauded the transformation of America into a security state. This is what happens when you elect a man who sees the Constitution as an inconvenient obstacle rather than a governing principle. Trumpism is the complete erasure of the distinction between justice and political power. The rule of law becomes merely the rule of his law. And every institution that might have once checked this impulse, Congress, the judiciary, the press, has been so thoroughly delegitimized that it no longer functions as a check on anything. The approval rating tells the story: 39 to 41% by year's end. 40% of America still supports this man. 40%. In the face of record low consumer confidence, rising unemployment, and the militarization of domestic policing, 40% of Americans say, yes, this is what we want. It is a verdict on the American electorate that should be recorded in the annals of democratic failure. But we must ask ourselves, why? Why does he maintain even this degraded level of support? The answer is simple and tragic, because half the country is at war with the other half. Trump has successfully converted American politics from a competition of ideas into a battle of tribes. And in tribal warfare, facts are irrelevant, data is irrelevant, the economy is irrelevant. What matters is that your side is owning the libs, as the vulgar expression goes. What matters is that you've made people you don't like unhappy. This is not governance, this is not conservatism, this is not even politics in any recognizable sense. This is pure, uncut tribalism, dressed up in the language of America First and populism. The foreign policy achievements, let's be honest about them. The man has effectively abdicated American leadership. He's pressured Ukraine into a disadvantageous peace by threatening to cut off aid. He's cozied up to Russia in a way that would have seemed like fiction if written as a screenplay. And he's done all this while maintaining the nuclear arsenal and the global military presence that costs more to maintain than the entire GDP of most nations. It's colonialism with a megaphone. It's empire, but with the etiquette removed. So here we stand, at the threshold of 2026. The federal government has been gutted. The civil service has been politicized. The rule of law has been subordinated to executive whim. The economy is mediocre at best. Unemployment is rising. Consumer confidence is in free fall. And the man responsible sits in the most powerful office in the world, tweeting his grievances and congratulating himself on his efficiency. And the Republican Party, that party of Lincoln, of Eisenhower, has been so thoroughly converted into a Trump personality cult that it no longer recognizes itself. This is the year that will be remembered not as a triumph of populism or a rejection of the establishment, but as the year when the American people discovered that they could trade freedom for the illusion of strength, that they could sacrifice democracy for the promise of greatness, that they could hand over the keys to the Republic to a man who sees the Constitution not as a document to preserve, but as an obstacle to overcome. Voltaire once wrote that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Trump didn't need to make anyone believe absurdities. The absurdities were already there, waiting to be activated. All he needed to do was point at them and say, yes. That's the answer. That's what you've been looking for. And the rest, as they say, is history.